Hey guys, how you going? I'm still a little unwell, still got a bit of a croaky voice, but I had to come here and do this. Glamis Calling seems to have uploaded another post. This is the intro. Welcome to the information portal. Dear reader, since this site became public, there's been a great deal of speculation online about the purpose of the site and about our actions immediately after we were exposed by content providers in both the United States and Australia. I wonder who they're talking about there in Australia. It's been a very busy year, and though there's been some communication over the past year, we, or more forthrightly, I haven't addressed some specific questions that you've asked. This landing page seemed to be the best place to address these questions, since it's the page that we initially use as an introduction for our intended audience prior to our exposure to Glamis Calling as a temporary communication site. Although the content below addresses questions specific to this site and our actions immediately following our wide public exposure, we will issue a more expansive facts in near future to cover other questions we've received. Now, there are plans for this blog. Glamis Calling was originally launched in 2019 as a temporary interstitial, I don't know how to say that word, portal for WGC, the World Governing Council delegates, electors and approved associates during the overhaul of our secure communications platforms and communication archive site, which was hosted on the deep web. You can find references to these upgrades in our archive, some of which were gradually implemented beginning of May 2019. Via separate offline communications, our associates had been directed to the Glamis Calling blog, and we provided an introduction that still exists in italic font at the bottom of this post. Glamis Calling includes an archive of directives and posts going back to 2016. Communications prior to 2016 were not copied over to this temporary site. And the initial, I'll get to the most recent post in a minute, but I'm just going to introduce people who don't know about this. Okay. Initial plans for this blog. When we launched Glamis Calling, we expected it would be up for a few months at most. Though we were aware that others outside of our intended audience might stumble across the site, we opted to accept that risk in return for allowing easy access to our associates abroad, whose signing credentials had been suspended at a certain point while the official platforms were being upgraded. All these upgrades, and when they went through all the nodes and changing things, I wonder if that had anything to do with Starlink. Moving themselves from the internet to Starlink. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, guys. Okay, we traded secure access for ease of access. We used a format we could set up quickly and that could be easily navigated by our intended audience. We were confident that our more sensitive communications were crafted in such a manner that those outside our intended audience would not be able to decode them. As part of our effort to upgrade our communication systems, we hired a new brilliant Chief of Technology, Tiamat Marbani, who literally added new dimensions to our communications platforms. The innovations and upgrades are wonderful, but though some were implemented in mid-2019, the more expansive upgrades wouldn't be fully coded until the first quarter of 2020. This delay meant that every day this site remained up, we continued to risk exposure. Each time we voted to extend the timeline for implementing the improvements on our secure platforms, we also voted to accept the risk that this blog would be discovered by a larger audience. And each time we voted to accept that risk, we effectively became more comfortable with the idea of exposure. Still, as we worked to add new features to our upgraded platforms, eventful months rolled by without anyone from the general public taking notice of our blog. Keep in mind, all of this was occurring within the context of an awakening and a raising of consciousness. After all, and we had already begun to discuss what it would look like to work more openly. Also, through other means, also spearheaded by Tiamat, We had some indications that we would soon enter a new phase of more public engagement. Though we expected some form of engagement, we didn't expect it to happen so quickly and on such a large scale. And candidly, we were not sufficiently prepared for the attention that ultimately came our way when we were exposed. Exposure of Glamis calling and our immediate actions. When the exposure occurred, we weren't sure exactly what was happening. At first, we were simply aware that our blog was being viewed by thousands of visitors, and we were aware that we had been mentioned by several high-profile content creators on various social media platforms. It's important to understand that this exposure occurred in the middle of an ugly, complex conflict with some dangerous characters from within and outside of the World Governing Council. Our immediate concern was that the exposure was connected to that conflict. Within the first 24 hours of our blog being viewed by the first massive wave of visitors, we ascertained that the large number of visitors to our site was the result of organic, public curiosity, driven largely by the fact that influential content creators had mentioned us and that the attention to our blog was completely unrelated to the aforementioned conflict. Definitely, I know we all discovered it organically, and that's how we went in. And at first it looked all, you know, maybe scary because of other people's opinions on it. But some of those opinions are turning out to be like, what are they called? Woke people. And one is called Rothschilds. So, yeah, I don't trust any of them, okay, honestly. So I'm just going to go off this website and see what we can do. As time goes on, I might go back through some of the posts to see if we can now maybe interpret some of them. Okay. In those first hours after our site went viral, we had a myriad of questions. Was the Glamis calling blog the only thing that was exposed, or were our sensitive systems compromised? What about our staging and testing sites, which were being used to test our new platforms? Was the attention on social media simply the result of curious seekers? Yep. Or were powerful adversaries creating a diversion whereby they would attack more sensitive elements of Luxembourg Cathedral whilst our attention was focused on Glamis calling public exposure? We needed to take steps to protect our information systems and assess the extent of the danger, determine whether we had been breached, whether data was lost, and whether our property, or more importantly, our people, were in immediate physical danger. In the first hours following the first wave of visitors, we took precautionary measures that were not well understood by the public and until now have not been explained to us. First, we moved Shadow Lion into place, checked the integrity of internal systems and local power stations, example Gerbeis. Then we reached out to critical partners in the US and UK to ensure they hadn't been harmed or breached. We took Glamis calling offline, which caused quite a stir. Yes, they did. They took it down for a little bit. We also took 2 adversarial websites offline. One was a site based in Europe owned by people who over the years have physically stalked me and have employed various schemes to unearth information about me. I have certain routines that they've become aware of, and several times I've been approached from a distance because they haven't summoned the nerve to get very close to me by their associates and investigators. Once I was approached while visiting a cemetery, and once I was a guest speaker at a university graduation. We've played a game of cat and mouse over the years. I've never felt threatened and always believed these people to be harmless. Nevertheless, I needed to be sure they weren't being used by more nefarious characters. And if we remember in the last Glamis calling video that I did, the people had attacked a lady and smacked her in the face and stolen her passport, driver's license. I can't remember quite 100%, but what I will do is I'll link that video at the end of this one on the screen, so you can click on it if you want to go back over that. The second site we took offline was loaned by a Los Angeles-based marketing firm which has set up an elaborate hoax website featuring my daughter and a few WGC associates. We believe the hoax was intended as a viral marketing campaign for a restaurant that ultimately failed to launch, and that was called the Cannibal Club. In the end, we determined the marketing firm was not connected in any way to the aforementioned conflict with the lower chamber, but it likely contributed to the heightened awareness of our family and indirectly to the World Governing Council. When we took these sites offline, the public noticed and commented... One sec, guys. When we took these sites offline, the public noticed and commented vociferously. The public's initiative and I think reasonable reaction was that we were censoring content deemed to be critical of our efforts, but in fact we needed to assure ourselves that the creators of these critical sites were not aligned with the malicious characters in the lower chamber, with whom we were locked in what amounted to a literal life and death struggle. We took a hard look at the content creators of these sites and determined that none of these people were connected to our conflict with lower chamber members. Rather, the exposure of Glamis calling was the result of truth seekers doing what they're supposed to do. Yeah, exactly. We allowed the adversarial European site to resume activity and publication within a day or so, and we came to an understanding with the Californian marketing firm that had created the hoax restaurant site. We deleted the content of their site and they agreed not to recreate it. We in turn agreed not to pursue the matter any further. I believe the European-based exposed Belenoff site is still in operation, but my staff no longer keeps up with their content. And I think exposed Belenoff is the ones that they went very woke. They're all in for BLM, Antifa and LGBTQ. Not quite business as usual. Once we determined that all was well, we brought Glamis calling back online and issued a statement to our new audience acknowledging that we had entered a new phase of engagement. Committed to a more inclusive, open approach, we opted not to delete any of the archived communications that had been copied over from the secure site, and they are still available here for your review. While all this was happening, our lower chamber adversaries took notice. Our intelligence indicated they were poised to interfere with several social media influencers who were reporting on us, but we don't understand the motivation behind this intended interference. No one contacted me, so that's good. We moved Shadowline into place to ensure these influencers would be able to operate freely, but there were some close calls. Wow, really? Were they trying to protect the people that were just seeking the truth and reporting on it? Because I know I was one of them. We may understand these social media content creators are critical of us, and perhaps we may count some of them as adversaries, but we also understand they have an important role in free speech, which is a crucial component of any free society. Though some of their reporting misses the mark for accuracy, we understand this is in large part due to our historical secrecy. If we have been less than transparent, it is inevitable that much of our work will only be seen through a glass darkly. And I did look at it that way too, until I realised that the sites that we were reading, who were scary about these people, yeah, I think they're the misinformation, to be honest. Okay. In our initial communication to the public following exposure, we stated it was our intention to leave the site up for a time, but that we'd eventually take it offline and move quietly back to the shadows. Ironically, just a few days after our viral exposure occurred, we completed the upgrades on our secure platforms and migrated our communications to these platforms. Sensitive communications are now handled through our upgraded systems, and for the most part, the blog you're reading now, Glamis Calling, is used to communicate with our new audience. It is our hope that the public will understand our work sometimes requires us to keep some communications private, and it is out of necessity and not malice that we maintain a secure and separate platform for sensitive communications. That being said, we will from time to time use this site to mirror certain communications to world leaders, especially when we want them to know that you're watching. In getting to know our readers, it's become apparent to me and my staff that your goals are very closely aligned with ours, and despite appearances, we've made good progress in supporting our common goals. In the current socio-political environment, it may appear as though we're taking one step forward and 10 steps back, but rest assured things are not as bad as they seem. Soon after our initial publication was released, one of our new audience members, I call her Firefly, said that she hoped we would keep the site up as long as possible. Firefly was the first big-name content creator thought leader to bring attention to Glamis' calling. We believe our exposure was in large part due to her reporting. Well, the first person that I knew to report was Yig and Deception Bites. As a content creator, she was fearless like a tiger. In her reporting, she holds nothing back in her opposition to tyranny. Unlike many content providers, she doesn't cater to the expectations of her audience. Rather, she reports her findings as she sees them. Her request that we keep the site up was, in effect, the opposition saying, if you have nothing to hide, stay in the light. Let us inspect your work product. We felt that we could not, in good faith, refuse her request, and this site will remain online for the foreseeable future. I hope this post helps illustrate our commitment to work with as much transparency as possible. We appreciate the feedback left as comments attached to our historical posts, and I assure you none are ever deleted. All feedback is read by my staff, and your comments are included in a report that I review on a regular basis. I'm grateful for the opportunity to engage with you and look forward to a better year in 2021. Somerset, Belenoff. Okay, the language shown in italics was used to introduce this blog to our original audience when we rolled it out. Okay. The site serves as the official external communication vehicle for the World Governing Council and the Wet and Upper Chamber. If you've been directed here for instruction, note that most messages are intentionally obscure. Audio files are up to date as of March 2019, and underlying messages alternate between Kestrel and Tanager nodes. If you have difficulty understanding a particular message, you may reach out to Luxembourg Cathedral on Node 9 of the Forgotten Frequency. After authentication, you may receive additional instruction. In the upper chamber, we often say debate is required, respectful dissent is allowed, and betrayal is death. Delegates and electors must bear this in mind whilst reading the instructions written herein. By the time the information is posted here, the debate is over and dissent has been noted. Best regards, Somerset, Belenoff. Now let's go to the most recent post. London bridges down. Okay. It's been a long time since I or anyone from the council has posted here, and I'm sorry that the Queen's passing is the subject that brings us back together. The world has changed so very much since this portal became known to the public. We've seen worldwide strife, disease, and wanton destruction on a massive scale. No one has been left untouched by the events of the previous 2.5 years. At the Council, we are employing means at our disposal to exert, where appropriate, a degree of influence, and we've seen progress. Over the past several weeks, it's become apparent that a post here is long overdue, and in the very near future will provide insight into our successes and failures in our efforts to repair some of what has been broken. But that is for another day. For the moment, I wish to express my gratitude to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth for allowing me to represent the United Kingdom on the Wetton Council. Although the Council and my position here have evolved, and though our views and opinions were sometimes worlds apart, I remain the Queen's most humble and obedient subject. I hope my tenure on the Council brought Her Majesty more comfort than vexation. With the ushering in of a new monarch, a new era of governance begins, and in my time as the United Kingdom's representative on the Council comes to an end, His Majesty King Charles will almost certainly appoint a new representative to sit in the upper chamber. So anyone wondering who's coming next, it is Charles, and he's going to bring in the Great Reset with him. Okay, he will almost certainly appoint a new representative to sit in the upper chamber. Since the restructuring of the council, I've officially held dual positions as the chief executive of the World Governing Council and also as Her Majesty's official representative. This has sometimes presented awkward choices, as I've endeavoured to serve the Queen's interest while also making decisions as head of the council. Going forward, I welcome the King's newly appointed elector, but rest assured, I shall remain firmly at the helm of this governing body. Thank you for all your supports and comments. Faithfully yours, Somerset Belenoff. Now, I don't know what to think of this. And that's all I'm going to say. I really don't know. I need time for this thing to sink in. And we need more information, actually. We need more information on the Queen herself. Yeah. But that's what the new post is, okay? So I believe they're telling us that King Charles will be the next one, right? And I know for a fact he's going to try and bring in the Great Reset. So let me just think about this for a while, and if I come up with any, any opinions on this, then I will post another video. But this is the newest one in the meantime. Okay, it's been a year and a bit since they posted last. So there you go. You can let me know down below what you think about all this. Okay, guys? Okay, this is going to be a short video. Have a good morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are. And I'll talk to you soon. Actually, I'll be back tomorrow with a live. Okay, guys, have a good one. Bye.